The Great Hall on Nexus Prime was bigger than any building humans had ever made. The crystal walls reached up so high that clouds formed near the ceiling. 7 massive thrones floated in the air, each one holding a creature that ruled over billions of lives across the galaxy. The air itself seemed to vibrate with power and ancient authority. Ambassador Li Dongwu stood at the center of it all. His simple black suit looked tiny compared to the enormous aliens around him, but his back was straight, and his hands were steady. He had been expecting this day for months. The signs had been there in every trade negotiation, every diplomatic meeting, every time human ships tried to dock at alien stations. The Vorthek Emperor was the first to speak. His voice was like rocks falling down a mountain, deep and heavy and dangerous. He had 6 arms, each one as thick as a tree trunk, and his scales changed color when he was angry. Right now they were turning dark red. Humans spread too fast, the Vorthek Emperor said. Each year they appear in new systems. Each year they build new colonies. Each year they ask questions that should not be asked. They are like a disease that spreads through healthy tissue. Li Dongwu wanted to argue, but he knew the rules. He had to listen to all 7 emperors before he could speak even one word. That was how the council worked. That was how it had always worked for thousands of years. The crystalline collective emperor spoke next. Her body was made of living diamond that caught the light and threw rainbows across the walls. When she moved, she made a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. But her words were not gentle at all. Humans learned too quickly. She said, "In 50 years they have mastered technologies that took my people 500 years to develop. They reverse engineer our machines. They copy our weapons. They steal our secrets with smiles on their faces. This is not natural. This is not safe." The Hive Queen was third. Her body looked like a giant insect with too many legs and eyes that glowed yellow in the dim light. When she spoke, it sounded like 1,000 voices talking at once, all slightly out of sync. Humans are unpredictable, the Hive Queen chittered. My people think as one. We know what each other will do before we do it, but each human thinks differently. Each human wants different things. How can we make treaties with beings who cannot even agree among themselves? The 4th Emperor was made of pure energy, a being of light and electricity that hurt to look at directly. His voice came from everywhere and nowhere at once, crackling like lightning. Human emotions are chaos. The Bright Realm Emperor said they feel love and hate at the same time. They make decisions based on hope instead of logic. They fight wars to protect people they have never met. We have observed their behavior for decades, and we still cannot predict what they will do. Next, the Machine Lord's Emperor was a collection of metal parts and glowing circuits that had been built instead of born. His voice was perfectly mechanical, without any emotion at all. Humans ask questions that have no logical answers, the Machine Lord stated. They want to know why instead of accepting what is. They question authority, they question tradition, they question the natural order of things. A properly functioning society does not need such questions. The 6th Emperor was something that Li Dongwu could barely look at. It seemed to exist in more dimensions than normal. Space allowed shifting and changing in ways that made his eyes water. Humans dream of impossible things, the multidimensional emperor said in a voice that seemed to come from inside Li Dongwu's head. They imagine things that do not exist, and then they make them real. They build machines that should not work. They form alliances that should not last. They win battles they should not survive. The last emperor was the oldest of them all, a creature so ancient that star systems had been born and died during his lifetime. He looked like a withered tree made of metal and stone, and his voice was like whispers from a grave. Humans are dangerous, the Ancient One said, not because they are strong, but because they are different. They do not fear death as they should. They do not respect power as they must. They do not accept their place in the order of things. They make other species ask questions they have never asked before. They spread ideas that threaten the stability we have built over millennia. Finally, it was Li Dongwu's turn to speak. He stepped forward and looked up at the 7 emperors. Each one of them had the power to destroy entire star systems. Each one of them ruled over more worlds than humanity had ever seen, but he was not afraid. You say we are dangerous because we are different, he said, his voice carrying clearly through the massive hall. You say we ask too many questions. You say we learn too quickly. You say we dream of impossible things. But let me tell you what I think. The emperors leaned forward, slightly surprised by his boldness. Most ambassadors begged for mercy, or tried to negotiate. Li Dongwu was doing neither. I think you are afraid, he continued. I think you have ruled for so long that you have forgotten what it means to grow, to change, to become something better. You have built your empires on fear and control. You tell your people what to think, and they obey. You tell them what to want, and they agree. You tell them what is possible, and they never question. Youth Vorthek Emperor's scales turned even darker, but Li Dongwu kept talking. But humans, we ask why. We ask what if, we ask why not, and that scares you because you do not have good answers. You rule because you are old, not because you are wise. You stay in power because people are afraid, not because they respect. Youth Hall was completely silent now. Even the energy beings had stopped their constant humming. 7 of the most powerful creatures in the galaxy were listening to one human tell them truths they had never wanted to hear. We explore new worlds because we are curious, not because we want to conquer them. Li Dongwu said we learn new technologies because we want to build better lives, not because we want to destroy you. We ask questions because we want to understand, not because we want to rebel. He paused and looked directly at each emperor in turn. But if you try to cage us, if you try to stop us from being who we are, then yes, we will become the threat you fear. We will become the enemy you think we already are. The Ancient One raised one twisted hand. The vote has been called. All in favor of exiling humanity to their home system, never to leave solar space again. 7 hands, claws, energy forms, and impossible appendages rose into the air. The decision was unanimous. The motion passes. The Ancient One announced Earth and all human colonies have 1 solar year to return to their origin system. Any human found outside the Sol system after that time will be considered an enemy of the galactic order and will be destroyed. Li Dongwu smiled, but it was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had just realized that his enemies had made a terrible mistake. You think this is a punishment, he said as he turned to walk away. You think you are putting the dangerous animals back in their cage, but you have just made the biggest mistake in galactic history. His footsteps echoed in the silent hall as he walked toward the exit. We will not wait to be told twice, he called back over his shoulder. We will not beg for mercy. We will not ask you to reconsider. We will simply show you what humans do when you try to tell us what we cannot do. The massive doors closed behind him with a sound like thunder. The 7 emperors sat in silence for a long time afterward, each one thinking about the look in the humans' eyes, each one wondering if they had just made a terrible mistake. But it was too late. The vote had been cast. The message would be sent to every human world within days. The age of human expansion was over, or so they thought. The news hit human space like a bomb, exploding in slow motion. Every human colony, every trading post, every research station received the same message at the same time. The galactic emperors had spoken. Humanity had 1 year to pack up and go home forever on the industrial world of New Bizan. The announcement played on giant screens above the factory floors. Kim Junho was welding hull plates for starships. When the words echoed across the assembly line around him, thousands of workers stopped what they were doing. Their faces showed anger, confusion, and something else, something that looked almost like excitement. Junho pulled off his welding mask and looked at his friend Park Min-soo, who was operating a massive construction crane. They had worked together for 15 years, building ships that carried trade goods to dozens of alien worlds. They want us gone, Junho said, wiping sweat from his forehead. Fine, but we are taking everything with us. Min-soo grinned and started up his crane again, reaching for a half-finished engine assembly. This engine was supposed to power a cargo ship for the Crystalline Collective, but not anymore. Now it was going home to Earth. The factory floor erupted into organized chaos. Workers began dismantling production lines that had taken years to build. They carefully packed every tool, every machine, every piece of technology they had developed. Giant cargo ships landed outside the factory to carry away the industrial equipment that could build entire fleets. The factory supervisor, Choi Yunji, climbed onto a platform and shouted over the noise, "Listen up, everyone, we have 11 months to strip this place clean. Every bolt, every wire, every computer chip gets packed and shipped to Earth. If they do not want human industry in their space, then they can build their own ship." Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. On the farming world of Terra Nova, colonist Yoon Sora stood in fields of grain that stretched to the horizon. Her crops fed 3 different star systems, millions of alien mouths that depended on human agriculture. But the emperors had made their choice. Zora activated her communication device and called every human farmer on the planet emergency harvest, she announced. We are taking every seed, every plant, every piece of genetic material back to Earth. If they want to exile us, they can learn to grow their own food. The harvest began immediately. Giant machines rolled across the fields. Day and night cargo ships landed in the wheat fields and took off loaded with grain that would have fed alien worlds for months. Every fruit tree was dug up and prepared for transport. Every animal was loaded onto livestock carriers. Every piece of farming equipment was dismantled and packed in the asteroid mining belt of Kepler 442. Captain Choi Hyun-jin received the evacuation order while his crew was extracting rare metals from a massive space rock. His ship, the Soul Mining, was attached to an asteroid the size of a small moon that contained enough precious metals to supply the galaxy for decades. Boys, he announced over the ship communication system. We are going home, but we are taking this rock with us. His crew looked at him like he had lost his mind. The asteroid was huge. Moving it would require incredible amounts of power and coordination, but Hyun-jin had been mining asteroids for 20 years. He knew exactly how to move mountains in space. They began installing massive engines on the asteroid fusion rockets that could push the giant rock across interstellar space. It would take months to reach Earth. But when it arrived, humanity would have enough raw materials to build whatever they needed. The most surprising part of the evacuation was how many aliens chose to leave with the humans. Dr. Kim Hae-won was a xenobiologist who had worked with alien scientists for years. When the exile order came, she expected to say goodbye to her colleagues forever, but her research partner Glick-7, a member of the amphibian Tellurian species, made an unexpected announcement. I'm coming with you to Earth, the alien scientist said through his translation device. These emperors exile humans because they fear knowledge. I choose knowledge over fear. Similar conversations happened across human space. Alien traders who had become friends with humans, alien scientists who valued human curiosity, alien artists who had been inspired by human creativity. Even some alien military officers who respected human courage. All of them made the same choice. They chose exile with humanity over staying in an empire built on fear. Captain Lee Jae-sung commanded one of the largest evacuation fleets in human history. His convoy of 200 ships carried humans and aliens together toward Earth. The ships were loaded with everything humanity had built in 50 years of galactic expansion, industrial equipment from factory worlds, scientific instruments from research stations, alien technology that had been shared in friendship, raw materials from mining operations, art and culture from colonies that had developed their own unique identities. As his fleet approached the solar system, Lee Jae-sung opened a communication channel to Earth Command. This is Captain Lee reporting. We are bringing home 3 million humans, 60,000 alien allies, and enough equipment to build a new civilization. Where do you want us to land? The response from Earth made him smile. Welcome home, Captain. We have been waiting for you. Earth itself had been transforming. While the colonies evacuated, the planet that had once seemed crowded now buzzed with construction activity. New cities rose from empty land, underground facilities carved into mountains and ocean floors. Space elevators stretched into orbit to handle the massive influx of people and equipment. The most dramatic change was in Earth orbit, where thousands of construction ships worked around the clock. New space stations grew like metal flowers, industrial platforms that could process the raw materials from the asteroid mining fleets, shipyards that could build vessels using the best human and alien technology. General Han Sung-min stood in the command center deep beneath Seoul, watching the streams of data as humanity prepared for whatever would come next. The evacuation was not just about coming home, it was about building something new, something stronger. How many ships do we have now? He asked his aide, Commander Lim Nijin. 15,000 vessels, and growing every day, she replied. Many of them are hybrid designs combining human engineering with alien science. The ships we are building now are better than anything we ever had in the colonies. The general nodded as he watched the construction reports scroll past space docks, orbital factories, mining operations, processing plants, everything humanity needed to not just survive but thrive in isolation. The aliens who chose exile with them brought more than just their knowledge. They brought their determination to prove that cooperation was stronger than conquest every alien who chose. Earth over their empire was a living rejection of the Emperor's philosophy. Dr. Moon Seo-yeon led the integration teams that helped alien refugees adapt to life in human space. She had never been busier. Her xenobiology lab processed dozens of different alien species, helping them find ways to contribute to humanity's new civilization. The most valuable thing they brought was not their technology or their knowledge, it was their perspective. They showed humans new ways to think about old problems, new approaches to science and engineering and art. As the year of exile progressed, Earth transformed from a single world into the center of a new kind of civilization. One built on the radical idea that different species could work together as equals, one that valued questions over obedience, curiosity over compliance. The emperors had thought they were removing a threat from their orderly galaxy, but they had actually created something far more dangerous than anything they had imagined. They had given humanity a reason to prove that their way was better, and humanity had never been very good at backing down from a challenge. 2 years after the exile, the solar system looked nothing like it had before. General Han Sung-min stood on the observation deck of Titan Station watching the massive defensive platform power up for the first time. The station was the size of a small moon, bristling with weapons that no human had ever dreamed of building around him. The solar system hummed with activity like a kicked beehive. What had once been a quiet corner of human space was now becoming the most heavily fortified system in the galaxy. Every asteroid, every moon, every planet was part of a vast defensive network. Commander Lim the Jin approached with her daily status report. The holographic display showed the entire solar system with thousands of blinking lights representing defensive installations, mining operations, and construction projects. The Jupiter defense grid is complete, she announced with satisfaction. 50 battle stations, each one armed with plasma cannons we reverse-engineered from captured Vorthak technology. The asteroid belt has been turned into a minefield. Every rock bigger than a shuttle has sensors and weapons. Han nodded as he watched a new ship pass by the station. It looked like no human vessel ever built. The hull gleamed with alien metals, and the engines glowed with energy, being technology that had been shared by their new allies. What about the hybrid fleet? He asked. The ships are beyond anything we ever imagined, Dejin replied with excitement in her voice. We have combined human engineering with alien science. Our vessels are faster than crystalline ships, tougher than Vorthak cruisers, and more adaptable than anything the Hive Queen has ever built. Dr. Moon Seo-yeon joined them at the observation deck. She had been leading the scientific teams that integrated human and alien technology. Her lab coat was stained with the strange chemicals used in alien manufacturing processes. The real breakthrough is how well different minds work together, she explained. The Tellurian refugees understand mathematics in ways we never imagined. The escaped AI from the machine lords has taught us to think in pure logic. Even the energy beings who defected from the Bright Realm have shown us how to manipulate power at the quantum level. Through the viewport they could see the construction of humanity's greatest project. The Great Wall was a massive array of defense platforms, weapons, satellites, and sensor networks that would make any approach to Earth a nightmare for attackers. The wall stretched across the entire outer edge of the solar system, but the real strength of the fortress was not in its weapons or shields, it was in the people who built it. Humans and aliens working together, sharing knowledge and skills that none of them had possessed alone. How many allied species do we have now? Han asked. Over 40 different races, the Jin answered. Aliens from every major empire who chose exile with us rather than stay in systems built on fear. They brought their knowledge, their technology, and their determination to prove that cooperation is stronger than conquest. The communication system chimed with an incoming message from deep space. Captain Park Tae-won appeared on the screen, his face grim with worry. His scouting ship had been sent beyond the exile zone to gather intelligence on the Galactic Empire's general. We have found something, Park said, his voice tight with tension. The Emperors are not just afraid of humans, they are afraid of something else, something that has been hunting them for thousands of years. And I think they hoped we would be their shield against it. The room fell silent as the implications of his words sank in. Hen had suspected that the exile was not just about fear of human expansion. There had been too many clues in the diplomatic records. Too many hints that the emperors were preparing for some greater threat. What did you find? Park rediscovered? The ruins of the Kethra Empire Park continued. They were one of the greatest civilizations in galactic history. Advanced technology, massive fleets, billions of worlds under their control, but something destroyed them completely. 3,000 years ago, the entire empire just vanished. The holographic display changed to show Park's sensor readings. The data painted a picture of devastation on a scale that was hard to comprehend. Entire star systems had been stripped bare of life. Planets had been cracked open like eggs, their cores drained of energy. We found evidence of ships, General Park said. Ships the size of moons made from materials we do not recognize. The Kethra called them the Devourers. In their final transmissions they consume entire civilizations and use their technology to make themselves stronger. Dr. Moon leaned forward, studying the data with growing horror. The energy signatures match some of the readings we have been getting from the galactic core. She said quietly, something massive is stirring out there, something that has been sleeping for millennia. Han felt a chill run down his spine. The emperors had not exiled humanity because they feared human expansion. They had exiled humanity because they needed a scapegoat, a sacrifice to feed to something much worse. They have been feeding the Devourers smaller races to keep them satisfied. He realized aloud, every few centuries they point these things toward rebellious systems and let them consume everything. They maintain order through controlled destruction, and now they are pointing them toward us. The Jin said. Han looked out at the defensive network humanity had built. The weapons and shields that had seemed so impressive moments before now looked pathetically small compared to the threat they might soon face. But he also saw something else. He saw the ships built with combined human and alien technology. He saw the space stations where dozens of different species worked together. He saw the proof that cooperation could create something greater than the sum of its parts. And a message to all defensive installations. He ordered, we may be facing something worse than we imagined, but we are not the same species that left Earth 3 years ago. We are stronger. Now we have allies who chose to stand with us against the darkness. The message went out across the solar system to every human world, to every alien refugee, to every being who had chosen hope over fear. The Devourers might be coming, the ancient enemy of the galaxy might be stirring, but humanity had never been good at giving up without a fight. In the deepest research facilities on Earth, scientists worked around the clock analyzing the data from Park's scouting mission. They studied the energy signatures, the material compositions, the weapon traces left by the Devourers. They looked for weaknesses, for patterns, for anything that might give them an advantage. The alien refugees proved invaluable in this effort. Each species brought knowledge of ancient legends, stories passed down through generations, about the times when the galaxy went dark. They had all heard whispers of the Devourers, but none had believed they were real until now. Dr. Kim Deun had spent her career studying extinct civilizations. She had always wondered why so many advanced species had simply vanished from galactic history, leaving only ruins and mysteries. Now she had her answer. The Devourers are not just destroyers. She explained to the Emergency Council, they are collectors. They take the best technology from each civilization they consume and add it to their own capabilities. That is why they are so dangerous. They have been growing stronger for millions of years. The room was filled with representatives from every allied species, humans and aliens sitting together planning their defense against an enemy that had destroyed empires when Earth was still covered in ice. But Admiral Oh Kyung-ho, who had taken command of the combined fleet, looked around the room and smiled grimly. Then they are about to learn what happens when they try to consume something that fights back outside the solar system. Ancient sensors that had been dormant for 3,000 years began to stir. The Devourers were waking up and they were hungry. In the depths of space, far beyond the reach of any empire, something that had been sleeping for 3,000 years began to stir. The Devourers had been waiting in the cold darkness between galaxies, dreaming of their next feast. Now, as their ancient sensors detected the massive energy signatures from the solar system, they started to wake up. Captain Park Tae-won guided his scout ship Seoul pried through the graveyard of what had once been a thriving solar system where planets should have orbited. Around a bright star there was only empty space filled with metallic debris. Where a sun should have burned, there was only a cold, dark sphere of compressed matter that hurt to look at. The devourers had been here. Lieutenant Bei Sujin, his censor officer, whispered from her station. Captain I.M. reading massive ship signatures ahead. They are the size of small moons, but the energy readings are off the charts through the ship viewports. They could see them in the distance. Vessels that made the largest human dreadnoughts look like toys. They were black, as the space around them covered in what looked like living armor that pulsed with sickly green light. The ships seemed to be made from the bones of dead worlds held together by technology that no living species had ever developed. Send the data. Burst to Earth. Park ordered, keeping his voice steady despite the fear in his chest. Full encryption, maximum priority. They need to know what is coming. The message traveled through space faster than light, carried by quantum communicators that the alien refugees had helped humanity build back on Earth. The data reached Admiral Okho as he reviewed the final preparations for the Solar Defense Fleet. The information from Park's ship made his blood run cold. The Devourers were not just another hostile alien race. They were something far older and far more dangerous than anything the galaxy had ever faced. Dr. Kim, the Unearth leading expert on ancient alien civilizations, had spent months analyzing fragments of data that humanity had gathered during their exile. She had studied the ruins of dead empires, the scattered records of vanished species, the whispered legends that even the emperors feared to speak aloud. The emperors have been feeding them, she explained to the emergency council that had gathered in the command center beneath Seoul every few hundred years. The Devourers wake up hungry. The galactic empires have learned to point them toward smaller, weaker species that cannot fight back. Her holographic display showed the pattern of destruction across galactic history. Every few centuries, a rebellious system would be marked for punishment. The emperors would withdraw their protection, and the Devourers would arrive to consume everything they found. They used the Devourers to maintain order through terror. Kim continued, any species that questions the imperial system, any world that rebels against unfair treaties, gets fed to the ancient enemy. It is the ultimate form of control. Commander Jung Min-ho, who had been studying the Devourer technology, looked up from his analysis with worry in his eyes. There is something else, he said. The Devourers are not just destroyers, they are collectors. They take the best technology from each civilization they consume and add it to their own capabilities. The room fell silent as the implications became clear. The Devourers had been eating advanced civilizations for millions of years. They had accumulated the combined knowledge, weapons, and technology of 1,000 dead empires, all of it controlled by minds that saw life itself as nothing more than fuel for their endless hunger. That is why they are so powerful. Jung continued, they have quantum technology from the Builder's, energy manipulation from the Bright Realm, biological engineering from the Hive Queens. Everything they have ever consumed makes them stronger. Admiral O studied the data with growing determination. The enemy they faced was not just ancient and powerful, it was also smart. The Devourers had been playing a long game, using the galactic empires as shepherds to provide them with regular meals while they slept, and grew stronger, and now the emperors are pointing them toward us. O said grimly, they think we are just another rebellious species to be consumed. They have no idea what humans do when someone tries to tell us we cannot survive. Dr. Moon Sc Oyan burst into the command center with new data from the deep space monitoring stations. Admiral, the Devourers are moving, she announced. 3 of their moon-sized ships have left the galactic core. They are heading toward the outer rim, where our scout ships have been operating. The timeline became clear. The Devourers had detected human activity beyond the Exile zone. They were coming to investigate, and when they found humanity, they would do what they had always done. They would consume everything they could find and add it to their collection. But as the Emergency Council planned their response, they realized something important. The Devourers had been sleeping for 3,000 years. They had missed the last 3 millennia of galactic development. They had no idea how much the galaxy had changed. More importantly, they had no idea what humanity was capable of. The hybrid technology that humans had developed with their alien allies was completely new. The combination of human creativity with alien knowledge had produced innovations that no single species had ever achieved. The Devourers had consumed countless civilizations, but they had never encountered anything Like what humanity had built, we have advantages? They do not expect, Admiral O told the Council. They have been fighting the same types of enemies for millions of years. Hierarchical empires with rigid thinking and predictable tactics. But we are something new. The plan that emerged was audacious. Even by human standards, instead of waiting for the Devourers to arrive at Earth, humanity would take the fight to them. The combined fleet would intercept the ancient enemy in deep space using the element of surprise and superior technology, Captain. Choi Hyun-jin, now commanding the converted mining vessel New Bizan, volunteered to lead the advanced squadron. We are not just miners anymore, he told his crew. We are the people who dig graves for gods. The preparation was frantic, and desperate scientists worked around the clock to analyze every scrap of data about Devourer technology. Engineers pushed the hybrid ships to their limits, testing new weapons and defensive systems that had never been used in combat. The alien refugees proved invaluable, sharing ancient knowledge that their species had preserved for millennia. The Tellurians provided mathematical models of Devourer ship construction. The energy beings explained how to disrupt the quantum fields that powered their enemies, the escaped. AI units calculated weak points in armor that had seemed impenetrable, but the most important discovery came from an unexpected source. Kim Jin A young engineer who had been studying the energy signatures from the Devourer ships, noticed something that everyone else had missed. The Devourers are not just using the technology they have consumed, she announced to the research team. They are dependent on it. Their own original technology was destroyed long ago when they first started consuming other species. They have become parasites that can only survive by stealing from others. This revelation changed everything. If the Devourers were dependent on stolen technology, then they might be vulnerable to attacks designed to disrupt those systems. Humanity could turn the enemy's greatest strength into their greatest weakness. The word spread through the solar system like wildfire. The ancient enemy that had terrorized the galaxy for millions of years was not invincible. They were parasites that had grown fat on the fear and surrender of others. They had never faced an enemy that understood how to fight back. Admiral O stood before the assembled fleet as they prepared to depart for the deep space intercept. The ships stretched across Earth orbit, a mix of human engineering and alien science that represented the best of what cooperation could achieve today. We face an enemy that has destroyed 1,000 civilizations, he announced over the fleet communication system, but we are not like those other civilizations. We do not surrender, we do not bow down, we do not accept that some things are impossible. The fleet began to move toward the edge of the solar system, where they would make their jump to deep space. Behind them, Earth and its allies continued their preparations for whatever would come next. The Devourers were coming, but humanity had never been good at playing the role of victim, and they were about to remind the galaxy why asking humans to quietly disappear was always a mistake. The Devourers arrived at the edge of the solar system like a plague of locusts descending on healthy crops. Their moon-sized ships blocked out the stars, casting shadows across the defensive platforms that humanity had built. The lead vessel was even larger than the others, a twisted cathedral of metal and bone that pulsed with the stolen life force of 1,000 dead worlds. The Harvester Supreme had once been a proud emperor of a species whose name was lost to time. Now it was nothing more than a puppet of living metal and corrupted flesh, speaking with the voice of the ancient hunger that drove the Devourers, humans of Earth. The creature voice echoed across every communication frequency in the system, drowning out normal transmissions. You have been selected for consumption. Your fear will season our feast. Your desperation will make your essence more delicious. Surrender now, and we will make your death merely agonizing instead of eternal. Admiral Oh Kyung-ho stood on the bridge of the flagship Unity, surrounded by humans and aliens who had chosen to make their stand together. The ship command center was a marvel of cooperation with species that had been enemies for centuries, now working side by side at the same control stations. All ships, this is Admiral O, he announced, his voice carrying to every vessel in the combined fleet. Today we fight not just for Earth, but for the right of all free beings to exist without fear. Remember, we are not the prey, we are the hunters. The first wave of Devourer ships crashed into the outer defenses like a tsunami of destruction. The asteroid belt erupted in nuclear fire as hidden Weapons platforms revealed themselves and opened fire plasma cannons that combined human engineering with alien energy technology tore through organic armor that had protected the enemy for millennia, but the Devourers had destroyed 1,000 civilizations and they adapted quickly. Their ships shifted and changed, growing new armor where the old had been damaged. They returned fire with weapons that could crack planets, turning asteroids into clouds of superheated gas. Captain Choi Hyun-jin led his squadron of converted mining ships directly into the heart of the enemy formation. The new Bisun had been built to break apart asteroids, but now it was breaking apart something far more dangerous. Remember, boys, he broadcast to his crew, we are not just miners anymore. We are the guys who dig graves for gods. His ship, massive industrial lasers, designed for cutting through solid rock, sliced into the hull of a Devourer cruiser. The enemy vessel screamed as it died, a sound that somehow carried through the vacuum of space. It had been so long since anything had successfully hurt them that they had forgotten what pain felt like. The battle raged for hours, then dazed Devourer ships that had destroyed entire star systems found themselves outmaneuvered by human vessels that fought with a combination of tactical genius and pure stubborn determination. The hybrid technology that humanity had developed with their alien allies proved superior to anything the Devourers had encountered, but the ancient enemy had more than just superior firepower. They had tricks that they had learned from consuming countless civilizations. They could mimic the communication signals of their enemies. They could project false images to confuse targeting systems. They could even temporarily resurrect dead crew members to continue fighting. The tide of battle turned when the Devourers revealed their most feared weapon. The consumption beam could drain the life force from entire planets, turning thriving worlds into lifeless husks. In minutes they had used it to destroy the homeworlds of species that had dared to resist them. The massive beam lanced out from the Harvester Supreme, aimed directly at Earth. The blue-green world that had given birth to humanity was about to become another trophy in the Devourer's collection, but something impossible happened. The beam struck Earth new quantum shields and simply stopped. The energy that should have drained all life from the planet was absorbed by the defensive grid, and then something even more incredible occurred. The shields did not just block the attack, they reflected it back at the Devourers. The consumption beam, designed to be the ultimate weapon of destruction, struck the Harvester Supreme with the force of a dying star. The ancient vessel that had survived the destruction of entire galaxies began to tear itself apart as its own ultimate weapon was turned against it. Dr. Moon So Yuan, watching from the command center deep beneath Seoul, smiled as she monitored the energy readings. They have been consuming passive civilizations for so long they forgot what it is like to fight something that bites back. The quantum shields had been humanity's greatest innovation, a combination of human scientific curiosity and alien technological knowledge that created something neither species could have achieved alone. The shields did not just defend, they learned, they adapted. And they turned the enemy strength against them. Across the solar system, the tide of battle began to turn. The Devourers found themselves fighting an enemy that refused to follow the rules that had governed galactic warfare for millions of years. Human ships attacked from impossible angles, using tactics that made no logical sense but somehow worked. The alien allies proved their worth in the crucible of combat. Tellurian mathematicians calculated firing solutions that human gunners could never have achieved. Energy being pilots phased through solid matter to attack from within enemy ships. Escaped AI units coordinated defensive patterns that confused and frustrated the ancient enemy. But the real turning point came when the Devourers tried to use their absorption technology to steal humanity hybrid innovations. They had always grown stronger by consuming their enemy's technology, but this time something went wrong. The human-alien hybrid systems were not just advanced, they were fundamentally different. They required cooperation between different types of minds to function. When the Devourers tried to absorb them, the technology simply stopped working. Commander Jung Min-ho realized what was happening as he watched the enemy ships struggle with malfunctioning systems they had just stolen. They can only use technology from species that think like they do, he announced over the fleet communication system, but our hybrid tech requires cooperation. They cannot make it work Because they do not understand how to work together, the battle became a rout. The Devourers, who had terrorized the galaxy for millions of years, found themselves facing an enemy they could not consume, an enemy they could not understand, an enemy that turned all their advantages into weaknesses. Ship after ship of the ancient fleet was destroyed not by superior firepower but by superior thinking. The Devourers had become so dependent on stolen technology that they had forgotten how to innovate. They could only copy and consume, they could not create the Harvester Supreme. Badly damaged and leaking, the life force of a dozen absorbed worlds began to retreat. Its voice, when it spoke again, was filled with something the Devourers had not felt. In millennia fear, this is not possible, it transmitted as its ship limped away from Earth. You are just another species to be consumed. You cannot defeat us, we have devoured God's Admiral. O response echoed across the battlefield and was heard by every ship in both fleets. That is your problem. You think gods are something to be devoured, but we think gods are something to be questioned. And when you question a god, you usually find out it is just a bully with better weapons, the surviving devourer. Ships fled into deep space carrying news of their defeat to others of their kind. For the first time in millions of years, the ancient enemy had been not just resisted but defeated. The galaxy would never be the same, but the victory at Sol was only the beginning. The news of humanity triumph would spread to every corner of the galaxy, and the emperors, who had thought they were feeding humanity to their pet monsters, would soon discover that they had made a terrible mistake. They had awakened something far more dangerous than the Devourers. They had awakened the idea that cooperation was stronger than conquest, that questions were more powerful than fear, and that the future belonged to those brave enough to fight for it. The age of the emperors was ending, and the age of freedom was about to begin. The news of humanity victory over the Devourers spread across the galaxy faster than light itself, traveling through quantum communication networks that connected every civilized world. Within days, every species in the galaxy knew that the ancient enemy had been defeated not by the mighty emperors but by the exiled humans and their unlikely allies on the crystal world of Nexus Prime. The Council of Emperors sat in emergency session for the first time in 3 years. The great hall that had once echoed with their confident proclamations now felt cold and empty. The 7 thrones that had seemed so powerful when they voted to exile humanity now looked like relics from a dying age. The Vorthek Emperor slammed his 6 fists on the council table with such force that cracks appeared in the crystal surface. How did the humans defeat the Devourers? He roared, his scales turning dark red with rage and fear. It is impossible. We have been feeding those creatures for thousands of years. They are supposed to be invincible. Emperor Velinara of the Crystalline Collective spoke quietly, her diamond form flickering with uncertainty. Perhaps we were wrong about them, she said, her voice like wind chimes in a storm. Perhaps their unpredictability is not a weakness but a strength. The other emperors shifted uncomfortably on their thrones. For the first time in their long lives, they were beginning to doubt themselves. The humans had done something that the combined might of the galactic empires had never achieved. They had not just survived the Devourers, they had defeated them. The answer to their questions came from an unexpected source. Admiral Oh Kyung-ho appeared on the main communication screen, his image transmitted from the bridge of the Unity as it patrolled the outer edge of the solar system. Behind him, the diverse crew of the flagship could be seen. Humans working alongside alien allies who had chosen freedom over fear. You want to know how we won, Oh said, his voice calm and confident. We won because we never forgot what we were fighting for. You have been running from the Devourers for so long that you forgot how to fight. You fed them smaller races thinking you could buy time and safety, but all you did was make them stronger. The emperors stared at the screen in shock. No one had ever spoken to them like this before. No one had ever challenged their authority so directly, but the human admiral was not finished. The age of the emperors is over, he continued. Your system of fear and control ends today. Any species that wants to join us in building a better galaxy is welcome. Any species that wants to continue the old ways of oppression and exploitation will find themselves very, very alone. The transmission ended, leaving the 7 emperors sitting in stunned silence. They had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years. Their word had been law, their power absolute, but now everything was changing. Across the galaxy, the effects of humanity victory were already being felt on worlds that had been oppressed by the imperial system. Rebellions began to break out. Species that had been forced to pay tribute to the emperors declared their independence. Alien races that had been enemies for centuries found common ground in their desire for freedom. The Tellurian Republic was the first to officially join humanity's new alliance. Their amphibian delegates traveled to Earth to sign a treaty of friendship and cooperation. The document was simple but revolutionary. It established the principle that all species were equals, that cooperation was voluntary, and that no race had the right to dominate another. Within months, dozens of other species followed the energy beings who had escaped from the Bright Realm. The AI constructs who had fled, the machine lords, even some of the younger generation from the Emperor species, themselves began to question why they needed to rule over others. The human fleet grew rapidly as more and more worlds contributed ships and resources to the new alliance. The vessels were marvels of cooperative engineering, combining the best technology from dozens of different species. Each ship was a symbol of what could be achieved when different minds worked together, but the real strength of the new alliance was not in its military power. It was in its ideas, the concept of voluntary cooperation, the belief that diversity made civilizations stronger, the radical notion that authority had to be earned rather than inherited. These ideas spread like wildfire through a galaxy that had been starved of hope. Li Dongwu, the former ambassador who had witnessed the vote for Exile, now served as the first president of the Galactic Federation. The ceremony was held on Earth, but representatives from over 100 worlds attended either in person or through quantum communication. In his inaugural address broadcast to every free world in the galaxy, Li spoke words that would be remembered for generations. You tried to exile us because you feared our differences, but our differences are what make us strong. You cannot defeat an enemy by hiding from it. You cannot build a civilization by crushing those who think differently. The old emperors watched the ceremony from their empty thrones, seeing their former subjects celebrate a new kind of freedom. They had thought they were removing a threat from their orderly galaxy. Instead, they had created the seed of their own destruction. The Galactic Federation was everything the old empire was not. It was voluntary rather than forced, democratic rather than autocratic, open to new ideas rather than locked in ancient traditions. Most importantly, it was based on the revolutionary concept that asking questions was not a threat to authority but the foundation of progress. The transformation was not without its challenges. Some species found it difficult to adapt to equality after millennia of either ruling or being ruled. The transition from empire to federation was messy and sometimes violent, but the alternative was clear: stagnation, fear, and eventual consumption by forces like the Devourer's Admiral.